Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, at this time of year, even though it's been a long time coming, that combination of heat and flowers in their prime is perfect to create lovely scent. And tonight's programme is just filled with fragrance. I'll be making an area in the wall garden to maximise the possibilities of scent. Carol goes in search of the scent of roses, both in the wild and in the collection at Dutton Hall in Lancashire.
Isn't this just magnificent? And the scent is light and apple-like, delicious.
Rachel is visiting the RHS garden at Harlow Carr to see their fabulous display of aromatic plants and the incredible collection of sweet peas. And I'll be propagating herbs in the herb garden here at Longmeadow. This is our herb garden, which we've used for years in a very basic way, just growing enough herbs for the kitchen, but revamped it last year. And to be honest, of all the garden, this has probably suffered most for the rain that we had, because Mediterranean herbs in particular really don't like cold, wet weather. They're just not designed to cope for it. What they like is baking sun and really good drainage and quite poor soil. And one of the problems of too lush conditions is that they get incredibly lanky. And you can see how in here, and this is a disgrace, I do admit it, as a herb garden, this has not worked out. Now you can see how this marjoram, a marjoram and oregano, same plant, has grown incredibly lanky and shaded out the thyme, which has died back. A little bit of growth on that, but thyme hates shade of any kind. Another one lost here. Disastrous, really. Even this rosemary has got this classic dieback. Rosemary hates having wet roots. Now, I'm going to cut back in here, and I'm going to take some cuttings to give me fresh stock, which I'm then going to plant elsewhere in the garden where it has a better chance. Marjoram will regrow perfectly well. I love marjoram. It's great chopped up in a tomato sauce. You can add it really to flavour anything. It's got that particular hot oiliness to them. And it's that oil that we love, so you need sun to bring the oils out. I like to leave the fennel because the seeds are really the bit that I like to harvest most. Fennel seeds, either on their own, nice aniseedy tastes that you can just munch, or else with pork of any kind, are absolutely fantastic. And of course you can add the foliage to fish. It's got that particular aniseedy taste and fragrance. But they're magnificent plants too, absolutely lovely. Now there are a number of ways of growing many of these herbs, and now is the perfect time to take cuttings. First of all, you need to find a healthy plant. In fact, I put some in a planter here and deliberately mainly filled it with grit, and they're fine, growing perfectly happily in the right conditions, looking good, so that's a good starting point. The second thing to look for is a nice upright stem that is not flowering. What we need to do is hunt in there. You see, there we are. That's a non-flowering stem, so I'll take that. Always put cuttings straight into a bag, and the chances of them taking air increase hugely. Now that's all really good cuttings material, so we'll go down the bottom, cut that off. And it looks fairly flimsy, but that's all right. That will root perfectly well. And herbs at this time of year have got fresh new growth that's slightly hardened off, so they're semi-ripe cuttings. And this is the perfect time to propagate from thyme, rosemary, sage, any of these Mediterranean slightly woody herbs. Do it now, and you'll have a good set of plants next year. Now, on a day like today, where it's warm, speed is of the essence. Hence, the importance of the bag to stop evaporation. Essentially, all cuttings need the growing tip, some leaves and some stem, and that's it. So the first thing to do is to cut it down to size a little bit. You do need a sharp knife, and a nice flat surface, and make your cut just below a leaf node. So in this case, we can go there and just cut. And then carefully strip off some leaves, not too violently because that will tear it and then you get wounds. So that's fine there. We need to put that into a potting mix that is really well drained. I've added lots of perlite. Grit would do just as well. I just happen to have some perlite spare. And then put it in at the edge of the pot. That's not critical, but it does seem to help. I think it's to do with drying out. The plastic pot stops it drying out so much. And you can go right round the edge. And burying it about 3/4 way down the length of the stem. Right, I want to get these under cover. A quick label, water them lightly, and then I'm going to put them under my mist propagator. But you do need to spray them, and if you don't have a mist propagator or even a mini propagator, put them in a polythene bag. And if you put the polythene bag over the top, do remember, if you put it over like this, if I can find the hole, you put the polythene bag over the top and support it so it's not collapsing on it, and then every day turn it round so you don't get a build-up of condensation which will rot the plants. But if nothing else, just keep spraying it with a mist sprayer of water 2 or 3 times a day, and that will go a long way to stop it dying off. Right, let's get it in there. Well, Mediterranean plants have had a tough year of it so far. And anyway, making more should set me up to do better next year. But some herbs have had a really good time, and none have done better than mint. We've got various mints around the garden, but you can see that this Moroccan mint is loving it. And this, of course, is the mint that they make that delicious tea out of in North Africa. We've got eau de cologne mint there, and in various other places we've got apple mint, spearmint and peppermint. All of them really happy in this wet, lush weather that we've been having. Now, these are actually planted in pots and that's just sunk in the ground, because if mint takes root, it can take over, and it's really difficult to get rid of. However, for all its robustness, there is a potential problem for garden mint. And we went along to RHS Wisley to find out more about it.
The beetle is 7 millimetres in length. It's a shiny dark blue colour, and you're likely to find it on mint plants, either possibly on the upper surface of the leaf, but perhaps more likely feeding or hiding underneath the leaf. In the worst case scenario, it is a pest which will cause noticeable damage to the extent that people may have to take control measures against it. What you're looking for is holes in the leaves. It was recorded for the first time as a breeding beetle in Britain from a garden in Newington in Kent, and that was in July of last year. As far as we know, this is a specific pest of mint plants, i.e. Mentha species, both wild and cultivated ones. We don't think it will feed on anything else in gardens. The blue mint beetle has a typical sort of life cycle for beetles. The females will lay eggs. Those eggs hatch out into soft-bodied larvae, rather globular appearance with a black head and a blackish grey body. And the larvae, like the adult beetles, will feed on the foliage of mint plants. In Britain, we now have 2 species of mint beetle. There's the green mint beetle, which is native to Britain. It's not a major pest of mint in gardens. It's perhaps more common on wild mints growing along the sides of rivers, lakes and so on. Whether or not the blue mint beetle is going to be worse, we don't know yet. It's still early days. We're still waiting to see whether or not it will spread, and if it does spread, how abundant it becomes on garden mint plants. How you tackle this pest depends partly on how big a clump of mint you've got. If it's a small clump, it's feasible just to search the plant, pick off the adults and larvae as you find them, and that will keep the damage down to a low level. If you need to use a pesticide, there is an organic chemical called pyrethrum which you can use. That should be reasonably effective against the larvae, but maybe less so against the adult beetles. There are also synthetic pesticides which are approved for use on mint, and these include chemicals like lambda-cyhalothrin and deltamethrin. At the moment, we still don't know how big a problem blue mint beetle is going to be, so this is where the public can help us. They can send us records, and this will give us a better impression of what is happening with this insect.
If you think you've got blue mint beetle, you can contact the RHS via our website. Now, there's plenty to do in the garden without worrying about pests and diseases, and here are some jobs to get on with this weekend. My lavender has had a miserable time of it so far this wet summer. However, by cutting lavender back now, you rejuvenate it and give it a chance to perform again before summer is out. Be careful not to cut back into last season's wood because there's a risk of dieback, but just leave a little bit of this year's growth. I suspect, like me, that you've got out of the habit of watering, but don't overlook regular watering of containers. The plants are full grown, they're doing a lot of work and making huge demands on their roots. To make sure they have a good water at least once a week, even if the weather is wet. Parsley is an invaluable herb that you can grow and eat all the year round. And if you sow some seeds now, you'll provide yourself plants to take you right through winter. You can sow them direct outside, but I prefer to sow them in a seed tray or plugs. Raise individual seedlings so they're strong and healthy, and then plant them out in about 6 weeks' time. A job that I tackle at this time of year, every year, is pruning back these Espalier pears. Now, the point is that all restricted forms of apples and pears, whether they're espaliers, cordons, fans, or just bush or dwarf trees, need summer pruning. And this is to hold their form. If you prune in summer, it restricts growth. Prune in winter, and it encourages growth. And so if you want espaliers, then it's something you have to do regularly. Now, this time of year, it's not all about being busy in the garden. I think it's time to have some fun too. And visiting other gardens is both really enjoyable and also very informative. And Rachel's gone up to RHS Harlow Carr, where they have a fabulous collection of aromatic plants and really good sweet peas.
When I arrived early this morning, these Philadelphus or mock orange were already pumping out the perfume. You knew that it was there before you reached it. As you see, this is a very large double-flowered variety, and I think this is the best place for it, somewhere towards the back of the border, because you don't need to be up close in order to get that fragrance. When it finishes flowering, well, those stems can be a little bit ungainly. The leaf isn't terribly interesting. So you could grow something like a Clematis Viticella through it to give you a second season of interest. I grow this rose in my own garden where it gets much taller, but depending on how you prune and how open the situation is, you can keep it low, and then it's a perfect partner for lavender, also an essential for summer fragrance. And this one is called Peter Pan. It's nice and low growing, which makes it a perfect edging for the front of a border. Here at RHS Garden Harlow Carr, sweet peas are integral to the summer display. And I met up with curator Elizabeth Barnforth to get some real tips from the top. Even in a bad year, this hasn't been a great year for sweet peas, and look at them, beautiful.
Yeah, we have had a particularly good year where I think others have struggled. just in terms of the cultivation of sweet peas, the soil is probably the most important aspect, because if you imagine all of that top growth they're putting on during the season and the amount of flower that they're going to produce, they really need to get their roots down. So an open kind of structure is what they desire most. As long as you can keep it moist through the season, it's really important.
I love all of these very soft, lovely pastel colours, but this one right at the end, it's drawing me to it. It's the colour of almost an old lady's lipstick, you know what I mean? I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's got that kind of quite punchy, corally red
So you're
colour.
telling me that's not in your makeup bag?
No, it's not in my makeup bag, but
No, I know
love
exactly
it in
what
a
you
sweet
mean.
pea. It's great in a sweet pea.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's one called Restamel. And actually the scent is pretty good on that.
Of course, one of the best things with sweet peas is that you should pick them often so that you get more of them.
Yes, exactly. And I think always evokes memories of childhood, because I used to go out and pick with my mum, and I'd bring them in, and the pine kitchen table, which used to be all scrubbed clean, was just full of pollen beetle. But the real trick there is to just put them in a shed before you bring them in. They'll migrate towards the light, and then you will be clear of pollen beetle, and you can sit on your table, and just the scent will be wafted around the room.
So you get all the fragrance and not the beetles inside. This is a lovely variety as well, and again another small flower and not very frilly, in fact not frilled at all.
No, I think you're actually a lover of the grandifloras more, aren't you?
I think I might be. This is the way I'm leaning, definitely. In a container like this one, this is the Cupid series mix, that lovely blend of purples and pinks, which means you can enjoy that wonderful fragrance, so quintessentially part of a summer garden, not only in a place the size of Harlow Carr, but in the smallest plot.
I do like my sweet peas to be as tall as possible, actually. There's something about the height they have. But the crucial thing is that they're fragrant. Just that perfect scent is an integral part of the whole flower. And scent is what I want to get into this area. This is where we sit. And the sun quite neatly divides into morning sun here, so it's great for an early morning cup of tea in the sunshine, and then from lunchtime onwards it's in shade. And over on this side you get the afternoon and evening sun, and you can sit and lap it up. And wherever you have stone, you're always going to have the potential for more heat and more fragrance, because the heat bounces off the stone, it heats up the oils in the plants, and somehow the scent gets caught. So you want to create the most fragrant parts of the garden where you sit. And that could be, of course, more than one place, but you want to really pack the scent around seats. And far better to have one area that is really rich with fragrance than just dots all over the garden. So that's what I'm trying to do here. Now, we've had lilies and we've got the scented leaf geraniums, and these are all fantastic, but I just want a little bit more, particularly to go on into autumn. So I've got some climbers here. This is Trachyliospermum jasminoides. Now, I have never grown this before. I've often admired it in other people's gardens and love the fragrance. And when it's in full glory, it can cover a wall and just this mass of flower that repeats. But it's a little tender. But if I put it here, where the figs were, it's going to get full sun. Perfect south-facing sunny walls. And I've got a slightly hardier jasmine. For some reason, I've not grown a jasmine in this garden. I've had it in previous gardens, and we all love jasmine. And it's quite familiar because it's used in various things, but it's just on the edge of being cloying, but the right side, rich and strong and seductive. Right, before I plant, I'm going to add some grit. As a rule of thumb, you'll never go wrong improving the drainage for any plant that loves being baked in sunshine. And as an example, we've got some marjoram growing out of the wall. Now, you think of the marjoram in the herb garden we saw that was growing very lank and falling all over the place. This has got pure lime. There's no soil of any sort in there at all, and it's completely upright and happy. And that's a pretty good clue for what it likes. Right. When I plant a border, I'm thinking about all the colours. I'm thinking about the relationship between colours, the effect of colours. And I guess we should do that with scents as well. What will scents work like with each other? What effect do they have on us? And I'm wondering if perhaps we ought to be working the mix of scents with the same skill and subtlety that we work our colours, rather than just bunging them in. What I'm constructing here is a highly artificial exercise in scent. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what we do in our gardens. We create an environment, fine-tuning it, tweaking it to make it exactly as we want for us. But Carol has been in search of scent that couldn't be more natural.
In the British Isles, but the most widespread and therefore the most familiar is our dog rose, Rosa canina. It spreads itself along hedges, scrambling all over the place, and if it meets a tree, off it goes, descending into its branches. And it's these simple, single flowers which are so emblematic. It is the national flower of England. This is the Red Rose County of Lancashire. Standing at the top of the picturesque Ribble Valley is Dutton Hall, a 17th century manor whose garden is filled with over 200 different species of roses, rich in colour and heady with scent. And this is the Red Rose of Lancaster, otherwise known as the apothecary's rose, because it was used hugely medicinally and herbally, probably in many cases just to disguise some of the bad smells that were around at that time. It has the most beautiful perfume. It's robust, strong, has lovely clean foliage. I mean, if you're into white roses, then I suppose you could go for the White Rose of York. But it's tall, gangly in comparison, just doesn't have that scent. I know which one I'd choose. Roses come in all shapes, sizes and scents, and away from the geometric formality of the front terrace of Dutton Hall, the roses have been left to relax into their surroundings. Isn't this just magnificent? This is Rosa Betty Sheriff. It's got these big, open, loose sort of clusters of single flowers. It's the same simple flower formation as our dog rose. And the roses themselves opening from little deep pink buds, pink at first and then fading to white, so you just get this gloriousness, this great cascade of bloom. And the scent is light and apple-like, delicious. Both that and the fact that these flowers are so open, they're drawing in the insects from all around. The garden has been created by Catherine Perry.
The ramblers are really brilliant at just scrambling where they want to.
And judging by the roses here, she has a fondness for the older and more aromatic varieties.
I used to grow roses commercially.
Yeah.
And just some of these were actually budded in the ground and never lifted and sold.
So you've left them?
And I've left them.
Yeah.
And then made a garden around them.
And what in particular is it that attracted you to roses so much?
Well, as a child, we had ordinary, more modern roses in the garden, and I hadn't really come across the old-fashioned ones. But then when I did, looking at other people's gardens, I realised that there were all these roses that were far from stiff and rigid and pointed buds. There were these big flat flowers, there were giant single ones, so varied.
Old roses are so much more refined and subtle. When I first moved to Glebe Cottage, one of my burning ambitions was to grow old roses, and in particular this one. This is Rosa alba celeste. I'd read all about it, the beauty of its flowers and the perfection of its buds. The sort of shape that you feel the people who've bred hybrid teas have been trying to attain. All alberoses have really tough, almost glaucous foliage, and they're really disease resistant. And as for the scent, it's beyond words.
Just a few weeks ago, I harvested my first new potatoes from here. Everything looked great. Now look at it. It's been afflicted by blight, and you can see typically these chocolate spots appear on the leaves, and then in a matter of days, the whole thing is withered and killed back. Now, blight is a fungal infection, and you need high humidity and heat, and we've had just that. So it's very common. Right across the country, I'm getting stories of people getting it. The thing to do is to remove all the foliage, then dig up the potatoes, dry them out, and then eat them. They'll be completely good to eat, but they may not store very well.
Once you've removed the foliage, it is best to burn it if you can. Otherwise, take it to your local green waste collection for them to dispose of.
And don't grow potatoes in here next year, but you wouldn't want to anyway because of the natural rotation. If the weather's dry, you can leave the potatoes in the ground for up to a week, but it's probably a good idea to get them out as quickly as possible. Before I do that, though, I want to show you another kind of blight that's a bit more serious. Now, look at this. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 patches of box blight. There are in fact 2 types of box blight. There's Cylindrocadium boxicola and Volutella boxii. But the net effect is the same. The plant just collapses in on itself and dies back. Once it's here, it's unlikely to disappear very quickly. You can't spray specifically for it, even if you want to. Your best bet currently is just to clean it all out and leave it. Don't feed it, because all you're doing is getting soft growth that is more prone. By the way, if you've had blight, really be interested to hear from you, because box blight is one of those things we are all learning about all the time. However, first job I'm going to do is cut out all the material, pick up every scrap of stuff, and then really importantly disinfect my secateurs, and hopefully it doesn't spread. But it's not all doom and gloom. There's lots of lovely things in the garden. So enjoy yourself, and I'll see you back here next Friday. Bye-bye.
You can read more about life at Longmeadow in this BBC Gardener's World book. History in the Making. Next here on BBC Two, Michael Wood explores the Industrial Revolution in The Great British Story.